Cool.
Okay. Jen?
Hi. I'm sorry I'm not on video yet. I will be in a minute.
That's fine. You don't have to apologize.
Well, I feel like I like to be social when I can. Everybody else shows their face. I can do it too. So I'm new. In March I spent my first few months shadowing another agent. Most of you guys know that. And then end of March, I went out on my own. And I have one buyer under contract, should close next week, hopefully. And just working with another buyer who's had a really hard time competing because it's her first time and she really wants an inspection. And so she's had 4 offers declined, and that's been tough for her, but she's getting through. So, and also I'm working also with Kaylee, and she's really helpful, keeping me on track, keeping me pointed in the right direction.
Awesome. And Sherry, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Sherry Ling. I presently am studying to take my New York State exam. I took the Real Estate U course and took that exam about a week and a half ago. I got 69 and 75 information, and what I'm learning makes a lot of sense, and I definitely know why you need to do it. And my New York State exam is next week on Tuesday, and I'm looking forward to getting started. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey is actually the one who got me into it.
Yeah. Good job, Jeff.
Thanks. So I'm going to introduce Jim. Well, actually, Michelle, why don't you introduce Jim Wurtenburg, because you know him better than I do. Yes.
All right. So when Jeffrey and I were talking, he asked, who would I think would be a good vendor to have on? And right away, I thought about inspections, and the first person that always pops into my head is Jim Wurtenburg. So Jim is the owner-operator of Central Real Estate Inspections. He is phenomenal. He's very, very thorough, but not what I call an alarmist. And he's very patient. I remember when I first started and I was using him, he kind of showed me some things to look out for. And if clients have questions, he's more than happy to answer those questions. So my thought on having you on here today, Jim, was to talk about what you look for in an inspection. And in today's market, like I said, you're not an alarmist, and I tend to tell my clients we want to look for structural and safety issues only. We don't want to nitpick if our offer is accepted in this market. So just thought maybe you could talk about what you do as an inspector.
Sure, no problem. Thank you very much for having me on tonight. I appreciate it. This market, as everybody knows, is very different. Well, actually, this market that we've been in for the past 4 or 5 years is very different. With a limited inventory, it's hard for people to ask to have an inspection. And like someone had said, I mean, they have a first-time home buyer who wants to have an inspection, but most likely they're going to lose out on their offer. So some of the things that you should look for when you're going through the house, like Michelle said, structural and safety issues, are look around the windows and doors. See if there's cracks around them, if they operate properly. If you have a lot of sticky doors, you might have a structural issue down lower in the basement area that might be affecting it up top. If you have, cracks in ceilings. Now, this is in houses that are from, like, we'll say the 1970s to now, because they're all actual drywall. Prior to that, they're going to be plaster, and that's just common that they have cracking. But, you want to look for that type of stuff, and the sticky doors, the sticky windows, things like that. It's very easy to walk down into a basement and you would see, a wall bowing out or something like that, but it's the hidden things that you want to look for. As far as electric go, if you see an electric panel that says Federal Pacific on it, anywhere on the panel, open it up, it will say staff inside of it. You definitely want to have that panel replaced, or at least get enough funds, make your offer so that your client is able to have that panel replaced as soon as they move in. There's a lot of myths and stories about the panels, but actually is what it is there was never actually a recall on it because the company went bankrupt. But what it is that's the only electrical panel that the breakers, the bus bar that the breakers are attached to are on a spring. And those springs wear out where those breakers or that main bus bar can touch the rear of the panel and short the entire system out and catch on fire. It is the only electrical panel known to do that. So a lot of electricians will look at it and say it's fine and everything, but there's home insurance companies that will not give your client insurance if it has that type of panel. So that's definitely a big red flag, is going to be that electrical panel and checking that. Things like double taps that might get called out in a home inspection, they're a fairly easy fix. Other things to look for, are going to be, let's see, health and, one of the biggest things is there are a lot of flips on the market. And typically flips have been sitting for a while. When they're sitting, they'll have moisture build up in the basement or attic area. And a lot of people don't look at the ceiling in the basement. If you're showing your client a flip, look at the ceiling in the basement. If between those boards, a lot of times you'll see green or white on the board. That's mold. Not all mold is in the attic. But when you're going through a flip and you see the basement and it has green coating on the ceiling of the attic, most likely that's going to be a mold issue that will need to be treated because it's within the living space. So those are some of the things with today's market, or with how we've had with the shortage of inventory, of quality inventory. So as far as with the COVID thing, we're getting a lot of flack from people in regards to both home inspectors and agents not keeping an eye or not mandating their clients to do what we're required to do in regards to it's only supposed to be one person in the house at a time. The seller and the seller's agents are not supposed to be in there. The client and the inspector are supposed to remain masked at all times and remain in separate rooms, never be in the same rooms or 6 feet apart. And then we're supposed to go through the property after that and sanitize everything that the client or the inspector touched with sanitizer. So some of it is a little over the top, but I've had some inspections recently where I think I had one that had like 8 people at it with the buyer's agent, and the buyers, not getting antsy and wanted people to leave the inside, and the buyer's agent wouldn't go along with me. So, that's something we really got to follow the COVID thing, because your seller, actually we had one house where we were being watched by the seller via a little spy cam thing. She called her agent, this listing agent, and had her come in and tell us all to leave the property during the inspection. She made up her mind right then. She did not want to sell the house to these people because they weren't obeying the COVID rules. So the rules are out there, and we all want to try to accommodate and make our clients, the buyers, as happy as possible, but we do have to kind of draw the line some point. What else can we get into? Is there anything in particular people have questions about?
Sorry, I missed part of things, but did you guys talk about the option of doing a smaller inspection before putting an offer in? Just for like a buyer who's really uncomfortable completely waiving an inspection? Is that something that you do?
Oh yeah, oh no, absolutely. That's something we offer, absolutely. But we've gotten a lot of negative feedback from the selling agent or the listing agent saying that it's they're having an inspection before they put their offer in. Because what we do is we'll do a ride along. You can hire us to ride along with you, and if you're going to look at like 2, 3 houses at the same time, we ride along with you for that couple of hours and we go through our stuff while you're showing the house to the client as far as, you know, the layout and colors and all that stuff. We quickly run through, usually takes about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the size of the house, and run through all the major particulars so that you get a good overview of that, of what's going on.
What does that cost, like for one house, like if it was narrowed down to one?
To one, it's $100 for one, or $75 if we're doing 3 of them. It's $75 per house, so 2 1/4. But that's, you know, that's something we do, and you know, I thought it was a great idea because I was having a lot of agents about 4 years ago asking me about it, and I started doing it, and then I started getting a lot of people upset with me, so it's something I stopped pushing. But I personally think it's something. I mean, what's the difference if you have a home inspector go along with you and they're doing a quick run through versus the uncle who's a construction person who's going to call out everything stupid under the sun that doesn't have anything to do with the real estate transaction.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is something that we offer. I don't know if anybody else does. I'm actually the president of the local home inspectors, which a lot of people don't know. We do have a local home inspectors association. There's about, I believe we have 23 inspectors in it. And, but we meet every month and we stay up on what's going on in the market, what realtors are looking for, you know, issues we've run into in houses and how we handle it. And we all kind of learn from each other, which is a huge help to all of us. So if you happen to work with a home inspector who belongs to the Genesee Region Home Inspectors Association, that's us. They're very well informed. They know everything that's going on through the state, national, and local with the market and home inspections. One of the things I always tell a new agent, and whenever I work with somebody, I meet them for the first time, I'm never pushing myself on them. My thing is, you have to find people that you are comfortable with that will work with you as a team. Everybody views the home, and there are a lot of people view the home inspector as the bad guy that's going to kill their deal. And there are a lot of them out there because they're not people, they don't know how to deal with people. And they'll find this little thing and they'll dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it, which that's what kills the deal, unfortunately. So I always tell a new agent or somebody, you know, basically any real estate agent, find people that you're comfortable with, that work the same way you do, that will back you up. And is what I mean by that is you might have a listing and you have an issue with a home inspector, with another home inspector that came in and they did the inspection of your listing and they called out some really stupid things that you or your broker have never heard about. I've had agents call me, I'll help them, I'll even shoot them a letter to try to help get that taken off, you know, soothe out the buyer, even though the buyer's not their client, it's, you know, it's the buying agent's client, but soothe them over so that your transaction can move forward. I mean, you want people like that on your team. Same thing with an attorney and same thing with your mortgage people. You want people that are going to back you up. So you're going to go through a couple of different inspectors, a couple of different attorneys and things like that until you find people you're comfortable with to have on your team. But one of the things that gets pushed, and it is kind of like you've worked really hard on selling, and you know, we're these buyers, you've worked a couple of months, you've shown them 10 houses, you've had 4 deals fall apart, you finally got one to work, and now you're going to give them, you know, and this is what a lot of people, they'll give them a list of 3 inspectors to call or leave it up to them. You know, I don't do the inspector. You're taking all that work that you just did and gambling on them picking a good person, not somebody that's just going to, you know, take 20 minutes and run through the house and tell them nothing's wrong, or someone that takes 4 hours and goes through the house and calls out every screw and nail that's loose. And that's what I mean by you need to build your team, that you're able to call somebody and say, so that when you work with somebody for 4 months, you finally find that house, they get their offer accepted. You can say, I've worked with this individual for, for a few months. He's done multiple jobs for me. He has good references. I think we should go with him, just to save you a lot of aggravation. If you have somebody you want to try, go ahead. But, research, look at my person online and see what the references are and stuff before they schedule the home inspection. I don't know if that makes any sense, but a lot of people, in my opinion, put a lot of time and effort into getting that deal together, and then they just throw everything to chance by letting their client pick the inspector.
So does anybody have any questions for Jim? Thanks, Jim. That was great.
Yeah, so Jim, real quick, obviously as we're working with buyers and it's very competitive out there and a lot of people are waiving inspections, as inspectors, what are you guys doing to help combat that as your industry suffers as well?
Well, that's a real catch-22, and that's something we've talked about in our meetings for months. And some guys want to do, media things that, telling people that they shouldn't skip their inspection and all this, but all that does is drive a wedge between us and the realtors who refer work to us. So, that's all we can do is kind of hang in there and wait for things to happen. This is the absolute slowest July I've ever had. I've been in business for 15 years.
Wow, COVID.
This month here has been very slow as far as home inspection goes. See, we also do things like sewer scans and radon testing and construction draw inspection. I do everything to do with inspections. I do both commercial and residential. So that keeps me very busy. But
And you'll share your contact information?
no, you kidding me? Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's no problem. I mean, the best thing I always tell, and a lot of people will look it up online. We have everything online. You can schedule online. You do everything online, but you can also call the office and they take care of you as well. But
I'll make sure to send, Brian, I'll send out his contact information after the call.
Okay, thanks.
What, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What's
Yeah.
your, how long are your typical inspections, let's say for a house that's between like 1,200 and 2,000 square foot?
thank you for giving me a square footage. A lot of people say, what size, how long does it take? A typical inspection now, a house in that range, I'm looking about an hour and a half. A lot of it depends on how, excuse me, how involved the buyers get. If they want to ask a lot of questions, which my thing is, they're paying the inspector. So I deal with it as, I'm their employee while I'm working for them. I don't answer my phone. There's no texting. My full attention is them. So if they want to follow along on my heels and ask me a billion questions, that's perfectly fine. If they want to go measure the house and everything, and we catch up every now and then, which is basically how I like to do it, then we're looking at about an hour and a half, 2 hours max. So.
All right.
But that's a very thorough inspection. The report, my reports, I also try to keep it limited to between about 20 to 30 pages, and it includes a summary, just because people don't want a ton of boilerplate stuff to just fill pages. So I do a lot of pictures and keep the explanations as easy as possible so that, so people can understand it.
One of the things that Jim does that I really like for the clients is he puts together a binder for them. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Jim? What's included with that binder?
Sure. One of the things, when I used to be in sales, to make an impression, you always leave the client with something. Now, I'm taking, $300-400 from them, and we're just going to walk away and are not going to get the report for 24 hours. I don't want them to feel as if they didn't get anything for it. So we always give them a binder, a 3-ring binder. In the binder is a home book that helps them make different repairs around their home. They also get a free subscription to a product called Home Binder, which is basically an online service that they can input all of their appliances, their paint colors, their contractor information, every single thing to do with their house, which a lot of people will have in like a file or something. But this way, if they're out at a store or something and they want to get a gallon of paint, they can look it right up via their phone and looking into the home binder. Or if they need a contractor's information while they're out, everything's right there at their phone, all through home binder, which also is something that constantly is every month a maintenance reminder goes out from home binder, which is a marketing tool for myself, but the buyer's agent who is part of this transaction is also featured in that home binder monthly email. They also get a sheet that we've put together. I was a contractor for 16 years, and one of my biggest pet peeves is the contractors that come in, they have the great smile, they get the job, they get the deposit, and you never see them again. So we have put together a sheet to try to help protect first-time home buyers or anybody with dealing with contractors in regards to what they should look for, how they should handle it, get multiple estimates, you know, do background checks. A lot of times people will just get carried, you know, they get comfortable with that person who's in front of them for a little while and don't want to say no. They'll get a 30 return address labels that have a picture of their new home along with all their information so they can use it for doing any mailing they have. They also get a free concierge service called Porch. Porch handles all the contractors for the Lowe's. So if you were to have Lowe's, if you went into Lowe's and you bought something and you're gonna have Lowe's install it, those people actually work for this company Porch. So if your client is looking for somebody to put up a TV or change a hot water heater or something like that, they can get that through Porch. It's all free. So
Great.
that's pretty much it. And a paper to print out their report when they get it emailed to them.
Awesome. Do you guys have any other questions for Jim? Nope. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for jumping on and giving us some knowledge and letting us pick your brain.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Actually,
Jim.
if anybody, and it's you don't have to work with me, that doesn't matter, quite honestly. I like to help. So if any of you ever have a question about something to do with homes, home inspections, construction, anything like that, feel free to give a call and help you out the best that I can.
Thank you.
You know?
Thank you.
Sure thing. Good luck in your new future. And Sherry, good luck with your test.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you, Jen.
So, so that was a ton of knowledge to throw at you, or a wealth of knowledge, we could say. So what words could you describe to get your point across to a client regarding maybe the importance of a pre-inspection if they're insisting on having an inspection? Like if you know that that's their deal breaker, their line in the sand, what words could you use to talk to them and get them more comfortable to do maybe a pre-inspection instead of a full, you know, after your offer is accepted inspection?
So you mean like a ride along that he mentioned? Or
Right, exactly. So what would be the best way to talk to your client about that?
I don't know. I think it's difficult, at least for the buyer that I had in mind when I was asking about that, because it's hard for them to put the money out when they don't even know if their offer will be accepted. So that's difficult. But I guess I would say that I would want her to feel comfortable if she was trying to compete with other offers that, you know, if that's what's happening, if that's what's going to make it a level playing field and that's what she wants to do, it's allowing her to compete.
Right. So, well, Bev, you did a pre-inspection for somebody recently.
Yeah, my client's actually done 2 now. And
What? They did 2 and they haven't had their offer accepted. Is that what you just said?
yeah, so first of all, he lost several. He was losing, he was not getting his offers accepted for a while. So when I proposed the idea, because he wasn't comfortable waiving, then he said he would do it on one. And I'm trying to remember which came first. Oh, so the first one, he did it. He actually, it's crazy. His offer actually got accepted, and then he backed out. And then he did it on another one. And the inspector was nice enough to charge him less the second time. And then I'm submitting an offer today. And he wasn't going to be in town, and so he opted not. But he being through the experience twice, he felt more informed. So, so I think that was good. And it was only like he might have been charged like 125, and then the second time 100. In the scheme of things, it's kind of not a lot. He's still less than, even if he does 3 and loses 3 houses, and loses 2 and gets the 3rd, he still hasn't paid more than he would have just for 1. So
That makes sense. That's a good line of reasoning.
So is it less than when you do a pre-inspection because it's not as thorough? It costs less?
I've heard it called like the 5-point, like they're looking at the roof, they're still looking at water, the electrical, the furnace, and some structural stuff. They're not going and checking every single outlet to make sure it's grounded. They're not, and they're looking in the attic. They're not, the inspectors that I use usually are about 2.5 hours. And and it's a very comprehensive report that they're also sending out. So these mini ones are only like a half an hour, and he writes it up in just like a smaller report. So you're really looking, it's a reduced, just about the things are the most expensive things that could go wrong is really what they're looking at, not the little itty bitty things that, this switch is, reversed.
Every house is going to have something along those lines. Every house, but it's the big.
What's the cost difference between doing an inspection that's part of the offer versus the mini pre-inspection?
Well, mine, it was, they probably charge $375 for if I do the 1,200 to 2,200 square foot, say. If that's $375, this is $125. But I think with my guy, the second time we only charged him $100.
So you could really do 2 or 3 for the same price. So
right.
Right. So Michelle, would you agree that the pre-inspection or whatever you want to call it is obviously cheaper than the full inspection? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, there's a lot of background noise, so I keep muting myself.
That's okay.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm prepping my clients that if they choose to do an inspection, and I'm one that I really encourage it, they have to do their due diligence, that we're only looking for safety and structural issues. So I haven't been working with a lot of buyers lately. I've worked with, I have one that unfortunately we're struggling. We haven't gotten any accepted offers yet. One I did get under contract. I've been a little more listing heavy lately, but I've done in the past what Jim called the ride along. where, just take a half an hour as we're walking through the house, just walk through and look for those structural issues. The one thing I wanted to bring up that we have to be very careful about, if you get an accepted offer with an inspection during this time, you have to be very careful about what you ask for. Because if you ask them just to change a light bulb, you're renegotiating your contract. And if it's a multiple offer situation, they could move to the next one. Just want to make everybody aware of that.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's
Yeah,
how
so whenever you,
go ahead.
no, that's fine. Keep talking.
Well, I was saying that's how I actually got one of my offers accepted, was that people came in and were asking for everything. And they came in and said, as long as you don't rake us over the coals, we'd be more than happy to go with you. And we did, we had a quick inspection done. And we just asked him to have the furnace cleaned, which thank goodness we did, because we have a cracked heat exchanger.
So what did you, can I ask just on that, what did you do then? When the furnace was cleaned, you discovered the cracked heat exchanger. That's
Yes,
a big
so
deal.
it is a big deal. So what I do is I ask for a credit. I don't ask them to exchange it. I ask for a credit because I don't want the possibility of them putting in a substandard furnace for my clients.
So you ask for a credit of what it would cost
To, for
to
the,
to the seller.
correct.
For a new furnace or just a replacement of the heat exchanger?
New furnace.
Okay.
Do you ask for 100% of the new furnace?
I don't ask for 100%.
Yeah.
See, I don't go for the full 100%.
I usually
So
do like 50 because
Exactly.
they weren't selling a house with a brand new furnace.
Exactly. But again, I don't want them to put something in there that's going to be, so we'll ask for about 50%, because nobody covers it. The way I look at it, just because of my background, nobody's going to cover labor, right? So.
Right. So yeah, so like when you were talking about the asking for too much in the inspection, so anytime you change the terms in a contract is an opportunity for the buyer or seller, depending on which side you're on, is to renegotiate the terms. And so I had a referral client that I referred in Buffalo to sell their house. And he was quivering now over an electrical repair of like the difference in price from the electrician that the buyers wanted and the one that he wanted was like $107. And they had already agreed on the other buyer electrician to fix whatever needed to be fixed with an underground line to the garage. And he renegotiated and said he wanted his electrician that was $107 cheaper. And they ended up delaying closing by 2 weeks.
Wow.
And they still got their electrician. So, that blew up in his face where he should have just spent the $107 and been done with it, because he opened up a whole nother can of worms. And if they couldn't have come to an agreement, I mean, technically, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, they could have walked away.
Right, Beth?
I mean, and they were literally a day from closing. It came up in the walkthrough. So, you got to be careful when you want to take those risks. Especially in this market. The other thing that happened to that same client, he's not a very lucky guy, I'll be honest, was exactly what Jim said. They brought mom and dad and an uncle who was a contractor, and there were 9 people at the inspection. And at that time, that wasn't allowed. That was before we were phase 2, actually. And they saw it on camera. They called the agent. The agent went and made them leave.
Wow.
And they closed actually today, finally. And the first thing that agent did was report the other agent for ethics, because on multiple occasions, he brought multiple people through the property after the seller, even in writing through the attorney, instructed that they were only allowing the buyer and the buyers, the two people on the contract, and one parent in the house, but they had to choose who they wanted. So 3 people and the agent, that was it. And even on their final walkthrough, 10 people.
But that's,
And when it, what?
I can't, I don't know. I can't, just keep going.
So I mean, like, I don't know what'll come from that, ethics probe, but I mean, it's going to tie him up at least for a little bit,
Right.
to have to, respond. And they have text messages where he said, I'd rather take the fine than, pretty much he said he'd rather take the fine than follow the rule. So, so that's why they're pushing that. So, I mean, be careful, and have those pre-conversations with your clients about, COVID and why we're doing what we're doing. And I've framed it very easily with just saying, New York State's doing quite well compared to other parts of the country. And it's because a lot of us are following these guidelines to keep everyone safe. And we want to make sure you can keep working, that I can keep working, that the kids can go back to school, and that we can get back to some normal life at some point, or hopefully faster. And no one really disagrees. We're all just trying to do the right thing. So I haven't had anybody push back on that, when I say, don't, bring 17,000 people with you to a house. So what are your options about offering Michelle, do you offer multiple inspectors to your clients?
I do not. So very similar to what Jim was saying. I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I surround myself in business with like-minded people. My clients come first. So I've got one inspector that I recommend. If he's not available, I do have a second one, but Jim is always my first choice. I've got 2 attorneys, and that all depends on the personality of my client, who I send them to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 3 mortgage people. And again, it all depends on what their needs are as far as mortgage. And it's all reading your client. For me, I just read my client, find out what their needs are. And okay, I recommend you reach out to this person for your mortgage. This is the person again, Jim's my first and foremost, but usually he's pretty booked. So if it's not him, I move to all county home inspections. I've used them a couple times now, and they've done very well by me. So, because the way I look at it is each of those vendors, if you want to call them that, are an extension of us. So we want to make sure that we have somebody looking out for our best interests as well as our clients, because they are representing us. We recommended them.
Right. So,
Hey, Jeffrey,
yeah.
what's the timeline for these ride-alongs or these pre-inspections? Is it when you're signing up for a showing with your client? That's when you bring the inspector at the same time?
That would be my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't done one yet, to be honest, so.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you would do that while you're actually touring the property.
Would you disclose that when you schedule the showing? Because I've heard 2 different opinions on that.
I
Go
would
ahead, Bev.
disclose that.
So the ones that I've done recently, it wasn't a, it was a second scheduled showing. And so we had to ask permission, obviously. I was, told them what our intent was, and, and I think the only reason I would have been declined would be if it was a booked, like if it was such a hot house and they didn't have any, if they were running out of showing slots for people who actually were needing to see it. But both these, I said my intention, this, obviously the listing agent's going to love to get a offer that waives inspection,
Right.
a better quality offer for the seller. So I told both of them, and they were fine with it. They said just schedule a second showing, because we didn't want to have to pay the person if it was a house that my client wasn't even interested in.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
And I mean, with talking about that disclosure, I mean, the seller has the right to decide who is allowed in their home,
Right.
to a certain degree. So, you know, if it says in the private remarks, you know, only buyer and seller allowed, then you really need to get another approval. If, you know, it's a in-law situation where mom is going to be moving in, and so she's kind of part of the deal, just to make sure that everybody's clear, because again, you don't want to get into that situation where they get mad at you and your client doesn't get the deal because they know you were the one that let, you know, 40 people come through and look at their house. So, so he was talking about the home book, which, Michelle, that sounds similar to our Homekeeper app that we have.
It's very similar.
Okay.
Very similar. Yeah, it just has a list of, it's kind of reminders, like change your filter, you know,
Okay.
change your batteries in your smoke detector. You know, it's reminders about home maintenance. So it's nice to use it as a log also.
Got it. That makes sense. I know we kind of touched on it at the last mastermind about a term versus a contingency with inspections, and that sometimes, you know, you can have an inspection for informational purposes only. Michelle, have you used that at all?
I have not.
I feel like listing agents don't believe it. I think it's an inspection or it's not. When like,
right.
They just, I don't know, at least that's what it has seemed like for the one girl. Like she just couldn't, it didn't matter. The other offers, I mean, she wasn't gonna, she understood and we communicated it. She wasn't gonna renegotiate price. She wasn't gonna ask for nickel and dime stuff. She just wanted to make sure the house was what it appeared to be and what she thought it was. That was it. And we communicated that, put it in writing. Just then they go with an offer that doesn't have an inspection. It's just simpler for them, I guess.
Because they still could back out, even though they don't ask for anything. They still have, that still say
Right.
reserves them the right to back out.
Yeah.
Contingency.
Yeah. Right.
But you know what? Like, I wish that they would just, I wanted to say, like, she needs a house. Yes, she wants an inspection, but if you have 16 offers, line up a backup. Come on, like, give this girl a chance. But that's not their job. That's my job, is to find her a house. It's not their job. But
right.
It's hard. It's just like, it seems that's the way the market traditionally worked. A buyer had that right to have a thorough inspection of what she was buying. It's a big purchase. And it's just difficult to expect a person to compete in that way, you know? I mean, some people are comfortable doing it, but not everybody has all those skills and, you know, knowing how to fix anything that comes up, or thousands of dollars in the bank to just pay for whatever that might come up. Like, it's, I don't know. I'm frustrated on her behalf.
So, so as a listing agent, if I get multiple offers, unless it's a cash offer, I'm 100% accepting a backup. No questions asked, because it mentally preps the first buyer to know that they shouldn't really mess around or, you know, try to play any games. So hopefully that leads to a nice, smooth transaction. And then secondly, you know, you're starting to build relationships with other agents. Because how would you have felt, Jen, if somebody did extended the olive branch, let's say, and gave you a backup offer, and, you know, down the road, you had exactly the same offer from two people, nothing was different. Who would you choose? You'd probably choose the person who, you know, helped your client get a house, if that's what your, you know, client, because you've worked with them, right? You have a better rapport maybe than with somebody else. So, you know, we talk about relationships always, and it just, don't burn your bridges, I guess. And that's how I've looked at it as a listing agent. I always offer. If the client says no, then you've given them the option to be the backup, and you move on to number 3 or number 4. But you're doing what's right for your client, and you're also building relationships in the community. That is important.
So what's that communication look like when you do that?
The backup offer.
Yeah.
So there's in clauses in transaction desk. So like if you did like a continuation of purchase and sale, there's a clause in there that pretty much says you're accepting the backup offer subject to non-performance of the first offer within so many days. So normally it's like 14, unless they ask for an inspection, and maybe you'll push it out a little longer. And it gives the buyer the opportunity to back out at any time, the backup, if they find another property or just decide they don't want this one. So really, there's no risk to the second person that I know of. I mean, they're not like locked in where they got to wait for it to close. And my Walworth property, we use that backup offer very close to closing to leverage the first buyer to get their act together, or that we were going to go with the second offer. And I mean, when I say very close to closing, I mean like a week. Like we were going to delay closing and just kill the deal because they were being so difficult and they weren't getting their paperwork into their lender. And, they kept blaming it on COVID, and then it was, because he's working, and there were all these excuses. And kind of to find out, he was really just trying to drag out the calendar because they expected to put their house on the market. And because of COVID, they decided they didn't want to. And so they had only really budgeted for a certain amount of time to have their house on the market and close before they were going to start to feel that pinch of having 2 mortgage payments. And so they got a little nervous, and they were like, well, let's see if we can drag this out for a few more weeks by just, saying that they weren't quite ready. The contingency of the mortgage commitment hadn't been met. And so we finally, I just had to call the agent and say, listen, we've talked to the backup offer that expired. They haven't found anything. They're very much interested, and we're going to go with them if your client can't close in 7 days. And we issued time is of the essence. And I got a ton of flack for it from the lender. I'll be very honest. On the buyer side, I got screamed at. And my response was, well, we'll get your guy to do what he needs to do. And he was like, well, he can't get paperwork from ESL. And it just happened that my seller, who bought another house, had a bank account at ESL and had no problem doing the live chat and getting all the paperwork he needed for the same mortgage company. So I was like, well, he should try the live chat because my clients don't have a problem. And they closed on the day time is of the essence expired. And they did it 2 hours before. And we all sat on our hands because we're like, if this doesn't close at 4 o'clock, it's done. Like, there is no oh, there was a mistake in paperwork. Like, it was, if it's not closed, it's not done. So, so backup offers are always good. You never know when they might come in handy. So one of the other things, we only have a couple more minutes left, but one of the other things that happened to me in the last month, and some of you might have seen my frantic Facebook post a couple weeks ago, of getting to a final walkthrough, and the owner, which was a for sale by owner, had turned the power off. Now, she tried to say that, oh, it was a mistake, that the buyer should have called to transfer the utilities ahead of time. But when we talked to RG&E, the power had actually been off for about 3 weeks. So 3 weeks before closing, your client is not going to be transferring utilities or even having a conversation with the utility company. So Michelle, how do you handle that utility conversation?
How can you handle it, right? I mean, unfortunately, it takes a good week for them to turn it back on.
It did.
Yeah.
And it cost the seller a lot of money.
Well, and that's the thing that, so for me as a buyer's agent, I would, number one, be calling that listing agent and stating, did you make it clear to your client when they signed the exclusive right to sell, they agreed to maintain that property? And it clearly states there, mowing the lawn, shoveling the driveway, electricity, water, all stays on until the home closes and it transfers.
Right.
If you didn't explain that, then it's your responsibility. I suggest you talk to your client. Yeah, because I ran into that with when I had a house listed in Chile. There was a flip house, a little guy that's an investor. And he told me he didn't have to mow the lawn if he didn't want to. Excuse me? to remember when we sat down and we signed the contract, it clearly states, and I can read it back to you. And he was like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, yeah, no, this is, you want to show the house in its best light. I got so many complaints from the city, from neighbors on that house. It was unbelievable. I finally hired somebody to mow. And he decided not to fix something that he had agreed to fix in the house. So I had to pay somebody to go in and get it fixed. Because to me, in the long run, I would much rather give up the $60 for mowing. And I think it ended up being like $90 to fix these 2 gas valves than to lose my complete commission.
Right. So I had multiple conversations with the seller about the utility transfer, and the way I've always handled it, and for this year of real estate, has been, I have the final walkthrough sheet. I always send it over to the listing agent and say, this is my final walkthrough checklist. I'll be sending it over, as soon as we're done. I'll have the meter reads on that piece of paper, and I'll also text you a picture of the meters so your clients can verify and call to do the transfer. My clients will call and do the transfer as soon as they close. Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, not a problem, and it's not been an issue. So she knew the same thing. Why she turned the power off, I don't know. Again, she didn't have an agent to protect her, and she paid well over $5,000 in escrow money to put this couple up in a hotel. The locks had to be changed. And then because we couldn't actually get in the house before they closed, we had to redo a final walkthrough. So it was another opportunity to negotiate. There were things that came up that I doubt we would have found in the walkthrough. There was a cabinet door that was duct taped together. And unless you really were like unpacking and putting things in this cabinet, I don't really think they would have noticed. She had to fix that. She had to pay for part of their movers. They were moving from out of state. She knew that the movers were going to be there right around 4 o'clock. We still hadn't gotten in the house at 4 o'clock. So she had to pay for the added time for the mover. So they just got a check for like $4,800 because she just didn't want to pay the electric on an empty house with no air running, which would probably have been $40 a month. I mean, like nothing. And, so having those conversations ahead of time are important. My clients love me for life. I was actually with them for 8 hours from 1 until 9 that day. I replaced their doorknobs. Once the locksmith drilled the locks, I made an arrangement with a neighbor because they had food in their car that they could use the neighbor's garage. While they were at closing, I was like a little busy bee in that neighborhood. The neighbors were like, everything okay? And I just told them what happened. And they were like, oh, well, we can help. Like, do you need a cooler? The neighbors on both sides actually helped them unload their pickup truck because they just felt so bad for them. So it all worked out in the end, but not for the seller, just because she didn't keep the power on. So I'm going to be very clear with everybody from now on what the expectation is. And I've even went as far as drafting up a quick little like final walkthrough for a few days before that just says, I, the buyer, agree that I will transfer the utilities, immediately after closing. I think it says immediately within 24 hours after closing, and the seller agrees that they will keep the power on and that the meter read will be provided at the time of the walkthrough. So even if they do it, even like if closing's at 5 o'clock and RG&E's closed, well, the next morning they should do it. But the meter read is still the meter read of when we looked at the house right before closing. So I have that little sheet so that everybody's on the same page. So, do you guys have any questions?
Does that happen very often, that sellers move out and turn the power off?
I think it happens more than we realize.
Eek.
So because when I posted that on Facebook, I had people calling me going, yeah, that's happened to me twice. That happened to me once. And, you know, it was something I didn't even think of because I had had multiple conversations with her. So she was, I mean, it shouldn't really be surprising because the whole transaction was incredibly difficult. So.
What you get with a for sale by owner, right?
Oh yeah, my clients will never ever do that again. That's been a very big topic of conversation every time we talk, you know, through this escrow process. And they closed July 3rd, and they just settled the escrow today. So
Wow.
she had 5,000 held up from her closing for almost a month because they couldn't agree on things. And so we finally got that she fixed everything. And it really came down to either give the buyer what they wanted or they were going to take her to court. And she decided that was not in her best interest. So, so it happens. So do you guys have any other questions? No? Well, I hope this was helpful. I'll let you know who the next mentor is who's going to join us. Michelle, thank you so much for being the first guinea pig. And
Sure.
Michelle gets the shout out. She answered my email. She was the only mentor that answered my email, actually. So I've got to resend it. So
Well, you're
Thanks,
very
Michelle.
welcome.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Anytime. Yeah, and a few of you, you know, I've talked to before, but never hesitate if you have questions, if there's anything I can help you with. It's just, my email is my first name, last name @kw.com. Feel free to reach out to me. Just not in the next week because I'm going on vacation. So.
Yay for
Good
you.
to do.
right. And actually, when I did my first listing, I had Michelle join me at an open house, and to critique me and to tell me what, you know, maybe she thought I could do differently, and to kind of manage the crowd, which it was a dead day.
It was.
It was such a dud of a day, but anyways, but it was good to get, you know, somebody else's feedback. Like maybe I would use this word differently, or maybe I would do this, but it was very helpful. So I appreciated it. So, okay, guys, well, have a good night. I'm going to go jump on the new career people and join Rick and Kim. So,
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
have a good
See ya.
night.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye-bye.